Okay, I think we're live on YouTube, right?
Yep, we're now up on YouTube as well.
Okay, so good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this OPHI and MPPN joint webinar on the presentation of the Global MPI. Today we have a very, very special event, which the OPHI team will be presenting the findings of the Global MPI 2020 report. And we're going to have a fascinating discussion following the presentation with very special guests. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Gonzalo Hernández Licona. He's the Executive Director of the Multidimensional Poverty Peer Network, and he's going to give the welcome remarks. Gonzalo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Felipe. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. On behalf of OPHI and on behalf of the MPPN, we welcome you to this webinar. The world is still struggling with perhaps the worst health and economic challenges of the past 100 years. In some countries, things were better some weeks ago, but now COVID cases have increased again. In other countries, Latin America, for instance, COVID cases have been rising non-stop. Therefore, we all are trying to see now what would happen to the well-being of society during this year and the next years. We all are trying to cope with both challenges. That is why I think it's the launch of the 2020 Global MPI is very timely. In the report, we are able to see what has happened to multidimensional poverty before 2019. During that time, some countries reduced poverty. However, now we have COVID, and we know these trends may reverse. The report is timely because it has forecast poverty under COVID. In today's webinar, we'll be able to have a selection of important voices trying to understand poverty in various countries. First of all, we will have the presentation by the OPHI team, led by Sabina Alkire, the director of OPHI, and also by Mónica Pinilla, director of metrics and policy, and by Ricardo Nogales, research officer of OPHI. Then we will also be honored to listen to Sierra Leone's experience in poverty reduction. We are still waiting for Mr. Sheka to get here, but we hopefully he will be here. Mr. Sheka Bangura is the Director of Planning and Research from the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development in Sierra Leone. We will also have the pleasure to have Dr. Nora Lustig, Samuel Z. Stone Professor of Latin American Economics in Tulane University. She's been an expert in equality, poverty, measurement, development for a long time. We're also honored to have Muschett, former Minister of Social Development in Panama, and also an important part of the OPHI team. Thanks to all of you for being here, who can help all of us to understand better what we're standing now in terms of today's COVID challenges. This report is very timely. Welcome to all of you. Let me just give the floor to the OPHI team. Sabina, welcome.
Just before Sabina and the OPHI team starts, I'd just like to remind all attendees that you can type your questions on the Q&A as the presentation goes, and then we'll be collecting and raising some of those questions. We're also live on YouTube, so if you want to connect there or you want to share with your contacts, you can go to the OPHI YouTube channel, and then the presentation will be recorded and live streamed from there. Sabina, over to you. I'd like to ask the panelists to turn off your cameras, please, and microphones.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo and Ricardo and all. It's lovely to have this time of exchange. And of course, what we are most looking forward to are your comments and your observations. Next slide, please. But what we want to present to you is the 2020 Global Multidimensional Poverty Index. It is very much a teamwork by OPHI together with the Human Development Report Office in UNDP. And within the OPHI team, the work on the Global MPI was led by Mushad with Nikolai Sapa, on changes over time by Mónica Pinilla with Corinne Mitchell, Fanny Kovesdi, and Sophie Charlene Petty. And then the projections work by Ricardo Nogales with Natalie Quinn and Nicolai Sapa. So everything is very much a team effort, and we look forward to your inputs. This year, the Global MPI covers 107 countries and 5.9 billion people. And what does it measure? It measures the overlapping deprivations that people experience in 10 different indicators gathered into 3 equally weighted dimensions: health, education, and living standards. These are indicators related to SDGs 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 11. And what is done is each person for whom we have data, their data are scrutinized to see in which of these 10 indicators they are deprived. This is added up into a deprivation score, and then a poverty cutoff of 1/3, we also report 20%, is applied. And so they are poor if they're deprived in 1/3 or more. This measure can therefore, it is a direct measure of poverty, can be disaggregated and is for rural urban areas, for age groups, and for 1,279 subnational regions with indicator details for all. We also, this year, for the first time, a comprehensive update of changes over time in the Global MPI for 80 countries and 5 billion people in 2 periods of time. And Mónica will be presenting that. And also projections for how the COVID may have impacted these figures. Next slide. Very briefly, just to start, this year we update data for 25 countries and 913 million people. Based on these data, 1.3 billion people are MPI poor, percent of the 5.9 billion who are covered. So that's an acute level of multidimensional poverty. And who are these 1.9 billion people? Half of them are children. 2/3 of them live in middle-income countries, and over 84% both live in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, and in rural areas. So that's a little bit of the story, and much more detail will come out later. In terms of a multidimensional measure, it is multidimensional. 99% of the 1.3 billion people experience 3 or more deprivations, and over 4 out of 5 have 83 or more percent. Also, the second part of the report looks at links beyond the MPI with other indicators and finds correlations with low levels of schooling, child labor, informal or agricultural employment, and children lacking complete immunization, and also the impacts of natural disasters. So the MPI is not a perfect measure. It excludes violence, empowerment, work, many indicators we would wish, but it seems to be a useful tool for gauging acute levels of poverty. But how has this changed over time? Over to Mónica.
Thanks, Sabina. Now I'm going to discuss a little bit about the results of changes over time. Next slide, please. So as Sabina mentioned, in changes over time, what we did was include 75 countries of the 107 countries that were included in the Global MPI. These 75 countries were divided in all the 5 regions of the world, and we have 35 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, 12 countries in Latin America, 12 in Europe, 5 in the Arab states, 7 in East Asia and the Pacific, and 4 in South Asia. So these 75 countries cover around 5 billion people, and what we did was to analyze how poverty has reduced or increased in the last years. Next slide, please. In this way, what we did was to analyze depending on the data that was available. In some countries, we have data that were available between 3 years. So we have, in the case, for example, of Bangladesh, that we have data from 2016, I think, and 2019. And we also have countries that have data with larger periods of time. So we have the larger periods of time of 12 years and the shorter periods of time comparing in 3 years. So we have data from the Central African Republic and Gabon that comes from 2000, and from Bangladesh, that is one of the newest surveys that it comes from 2019. We use mixed and DSHAT survey and some national surveys that were comparative in the sampling framework, and that we were able to compute the same multidimensional poverty measure. For us, we use a modified version of the Global MPI. Why we use a modified version? Because we needed to guarantee that the indicators were harmonized and that we were using the same definition between the both periods. So for us, we needed to harmonize all the indicators. Sometimes we needed to drop indicators because one survey didn't include it. So in order to be able to compare with, over time, we needed to use the same measure. And we were make as strict comparable measure as we could between both years in the same country. Next slide, please. So the main results of this analysis is that of the 75 countries, we found that 65 countries reduced their MPI in absolute terms. Mauritania and Liberia reduced their MPI the fastest in absolute terms. And in here we have in this graph where were the reductions in the different indicators. So one thing that is important is that although the 3 countries reduced the multidimensional poverty in a large percentage, what we see is that the contribution of how they reduce the different indicators, so the deprivation and the different indicators vary between countries. So we have that in Sierra Leone, that is the red bar, we have that indicator related with nutrition, cooking fuel, and sanitation, and also electricity, have a higher reduction or a larger reduction compared with indicators, for example, in Liberia, that is the blue bar, that they in this country, school attendance and assets were the indicators that have the largest reduction, and in Mauritania, we have years of schooling. This is important finding because what we want to do is not only to analyze which countries reduce poverty, but also what are those indicators that reduce the largest percentage and that contribute to the reduction of poverty over time. Next slide, please. So 4 countries reduced by half the MPI. Those countries were Armenia, India, Nicaragua, and North Macedonia. And here we see the different years, and it's important to consider that every country has different periods of time, and that we want to do, and the message and the key message is that these 4 countries reduced by half their multidimensional poverty, and India, it was the country that reduced the number of people living in poverty by approximately 270 million. This is extremely important because it was the country with the largest reduction in the number of multidimensional poor people over time. Next slide, please. So in this slide, and it's a summary, what we're presenting here is the fastest reduction in relative and absolute terms. So we have that in the region that, or the country that reduced the fastest, that it was Sierra Leone in absolute terms, it belongs to Sub-Saharan Africa. And also we have that countries such as Honduras in Latin America or Mongolia in Europe and Central Asia were also countries that belong to this group of the countries with the fastest reduction in absolute terms. When we go to the relative terms, that is more in a percentage. In this case, what we see is that there is a change. We don't have the same countries, except for the case of Honduras, which was the country that reduced the fastest in absolute terms and in relative terms in Latin America. But in other countries and in other regions, we have that the countries that reduced the fastest in relative terms were not the same that reduced the fastest in absolute terms. This is also important to consider that the relative reduction, it will depend of the level, it's relative to the level where you start your levels of poverty. So in the report, we explore more in detail these differences. Next slide, please. And one important result of the general results is that we found that in some cases, multidimensional poverty levels are not the same as income poverty levels. This means that the reduction in income poverty and in multidimensional poverty in most of the countries are not extremely related or completely related. In some countries, you can see that there is a reduction, a larger reduction in multidimensional poverty compared with the reduction that you have in income poverty, for example, Sierra Leone. And in other countries, you will see that there are reductions of income poverty that are much larger than reductions in multidimensional poverty, for example, in the case of Guinea. It is necessary in this case, and the main message in here is that both poverties need to complement, because it will give you a broad or more complete perspective of what is multidimensional and income poverty in a country. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to move to two case studies, and these case studies, what I want to analyze is those really important studies, because we have seen that in the case of Sierra Leone, as I mentioned before, it was the country with the largest analyzed absolute reduction of multidimensional poverty over time. Sierra Leone had a reduction of passing from 0.409 to 0.300 in between 2013 and 2017. This created that the reduction in absolute terms, it was from 0.027 in the MPI. And when you analyze what is the contribution, or what is how these indicators, how different indicators contribute to that reduction, you see that those indicators that contribute the most were indicators related to health, or especially indicators related to nutrition, and also indicators related with years of schooling. But what we can see is that in the 10 indicators included in the Global MPI, there was a reduction, an important reduction because of this reduction, you can see the reductions in the general MPI and also in the incidence and in the intensity of the MPI. And all these reductions were significant at the 1%. Next slide. And finally, I want to finish with the case of India. In the case of India, what we see is that, remember that India was the country that reduced the most, or the largest number of people were taken out or moved out of poverty or multidimensional poverty. And in the case of India, there was a movement or a reduction from an MPI of 0.283 to a 0.123, sorry. And there was also a reduction of almost half of the MPI. And in here, when we analyze the indicators that you are included in the MPI, what you can see is that the reductions in the deprivation of nutrition and also reductions in the deprivations related with living standards were those indicators that contribute, or those indicators that had a larger reduction in their deprivations, and those also were indicators that also contribute a lot to the reduction in the multidimensional poverty in the case of India. In the report, you will find another important and interesting findings, and there is also in the webpage of OPHI, we also have like different country briefs where we explain all the countries that were included in the changes over time project and why those how the different indicators reduce over time. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mónica and Sabina. So now I will talk about another part of the report that deals with projections and the possible impacts of COVID. So based on the rich data set that Mónica just presented, we asked two questions. The first one is related to SDG, is inspired in SDG 1 and particularly target 1.2, and asks which countries are on track to halve multidimensional poverty between 2015 and 2030. We present those results for the 75 countries that Mónica presented, and our strategy consists of calibrating models for both the incidence of multidimensional poverty and the intensity, and then to deduce the trajectory of MPI to ensure its consistency over time. Then we apply and we base our analysis on different studies that have done scrutinizing similar patterns in development indicators such as child mortality, for example, or school completion. And in the end, we consider three models. We consider a linear model for the trajectories, a constant relative change, and a logistic model. The best fit is obtained by the logistic model, and in the end, that is the one that also respects the bounds of both the MPI and the correspondence of indices. Here you can see the results for the 75 countries. You can see that at the top end of the red line, you see the projected level of MPI for 2015, and you see at the bottom, at the red dot, you see the projected MPI level for 2030. And you can see the dash line, the black dash, which varies by country, which is the target. And what you can see is that we find that 47 out of the 75 countries actually meet the target of having multidimensional poverty between 2015 and 2030, irrespective of the model that we consider for the trajectories. We also find that 18 countries out of the 75 that we consider are not on track of meeting that target. And then 10 countries out of the 75 would meet the target depending on the model that we trust for the trajectories. Now, one thing that is important to assess is that we do find that there is significant progress, even in the countries that do not meet the target. What we try to do here is that in the 10 years that are following to the time that we have until 2030, there is a need to speed up the pace of poverty reduction in those countries. Now, of course, all the results that I present here are based on trajectories that were observed before the current pandemic. So in the report, we go a little bit beyond and we ask what are the plausible effects of the pandemic on the recent progress that was achieved in terms of poverty reduction. And of course, since we're looking at poverty from a multidimensional lens, there are many aspects that could be affected when it comes to the multidimensional poverty index, but we focus on two of them. We focus on effects on education and nutrition. Very precisely, we consider effects on school attendance and nutrition. For school attendance, we consider, based on UNESCO data, that 50% of primary school-age children who are currently attending school may see that situation disrupted. So we consider that scenario for our simulations. And in the case of nutrition, we consider that poor and vulnerable people who are currently not deprived of nutrition may actually see that deprivation appearing in their households. And based on the World Food Program estimations, we consider three scenarios for that shock. The first one sees 25% of that target population acquiring deprivations in nutrition. A lower bound sees 10% of the target population acquiring those deprivations, and then an upper bound considers 50% of the target population being deprived in nutrition. So in the end, we have 6 scenarios in the report. And you can see that 3 of them only consider the isolated effect of nutrition. And you can see that the effect is already huge, even though we're considering just one channel that could be affected. We see, for example, that the number of people living in multidimensional poverty can rise from 131 to more than 300 million more people living in multidimensional poverty. That implies a setback that can go from 3 to 6 years in the progress that was achieved so far. If on top of that, we consider a combined shock of nutrition and school attendance, then we see that the effect is considerably larger. We see, for example, that the additional number of people who are living in multidimensional poverty can go up to 547 million. And that implies a setback that is as large as 10 years back in the progress that was achieved so far. So in the end, what we see in the report is that COVID can have large effects on the reduction that was achieved in multidimensional poverty. And we think that these results are actually important in order to gauge exactly what is the kind of threat that we're facing. But it comes with a positive message in the sense that we need to act. So it is very much a call of collective action against this situation that, although it is threatening and the results can be very, very large, we do have time to act. So we need to set up a framework that combines and joins forces from different angles, academia, policymakers, and different actors to prevent these possible effects from happening.
So just building on what Ricardo has said, this global study showed that we still have 1.3 billion people in poverty before COVID. And this is the 10th anniversary of having the Global MPI. And yet we just heard that COVID could have set us back up to 10 years in a matter of months. And so just to concretize that, and we're so delighted that Sheka Bangura is here from Sierra Leone, we wanted to recognize that that country which had the fastest progress of the 75 countries, 5 billion, Sierra Leone. And furthermore, that progress occurred between 2013 and 2017, a time when the Ebola crisis raged in Sierra Leone. And so it is a story of success in a sense against the odds. And other countries that had good progress also did so in some cases during very difficult periods of time. So the hope that we have in releasing this report, as Ricardo said, is that it will, in a sense, provide information, but also motivation to act to prevent the setback of 10 years that could occur from occurring by preventing the increase of poverty, or where it has increased by confidently directing resources to end it and to maintain that. The final thing I'll say, next slide, is that we've only profiled countries. The report has a lot more detail, and our websites also have a lot more information. There are data tables, there are country briefings, there are the do files for students who want to get into Stata and redo them. There's an interactive data bank if you'd like to make graphics that are not already in the country briefings or would like a global view. Next slide. So we do hope very much that this is the start of an interaction, and that many actors in this audience will also help to make that call, to follow the example of Sierra Leone, to try to end the poverty that is rising emphatically and immediately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabina. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation to the three members of the OPHI team. As you've listened over and over, then the country Sierra Leone was present, because according to the report, it was the largest reduction in poverty in absolute terms. So we are really pleased, we are really happy that we have with us Mr. Sheka Bangura, Director of Planning and Research from the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development in Sierra Leone. Mr. Bangura, welcome to be here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you again. Sorry I couldn't connect earlier because of some difficulty hitches here, but I'm happy to be on now. And thank you all for this Zoom meeting. You know, it is really encouraging that you know, we've been recognized for the efforts we made in reducing multidimensional poverty during that period that the report covered. So I'm here to participate on behalf of the minister in particular, who would have loved to be here, but as I'm speaking now, is on other official duties.
Sorry, Mr. Bangura,
yes,
is there any
please.
chance you can turn on your video if you want?
Oh, okay. Let me
Thank
see.
you. So we can see you.
Let's
thank
hope
you.
that, is it okay?
It is fine, yes, it is fine, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much. And once again, thank you for organizing this Zoom meeting, and for recognizing Sierra Leone's efforts to reduce multidimensional poverty during, you know, that period covered by the report. So I'm happy to participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aguirre. Any?
Hello.
Hello. Are you hearing
Hello.
me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything else?
Yes. Well, I just wanted to say that we maybe in addition that we are not as so surprised that we're able to have a reduction in multidimensional poverty during that period. You know, Ebola disease, you know, outbreak in 2013, 2014, you know, came to dash our hopes, you know, because 2012, 2013, Sierra Leone was rated as one of the fastest growing countries in sub-Saharan Africa. If you could go back to the trends, 2012, we grew at to 20%, you know, when the disease end of 13 to early 2014 hit the Ebola, you know, and those were trying times, you know, we were very much discouraged, you know, so we fought very hard so as not to totally lose the gains, because before the disease had hit, actually, you know, youth unemployment was really, you know, coming down the country. I mean, we experienced shared growth And I think that multidimensional poverty discourse is trying to support, to reduce inequality. So Sierra Leone had these opportunities before the disease hit, that time, the Ebola. And when Ebola hit, and thanks to the international community that joined us to fight it very hard, so as not to lose all the gains we had gained. So by 2015, end of 2014, 2015, we had a very robust post-Ebola recovery strategy, both at national level and within the Mano River, Union sub-region, because we had both national and sub-regional approaches to ending the disease. Noting that it started in Guinea, coming to Liberia, and came to Sierra Leone. So we had this concerted effort nationally and internationally to make sure that really work out of those challenges at the time. And I think that approach, sub-regional international approach, concerted effort, enable us to withstand the effect of the disease, such that we could come out of it with some good with resilience, basically, and we could develop the effort, and now here is COVID. It's quite a challenge, and but we hope we're going to learn from the experiences we learned from Ebola, to make sure that we're not going to be as probably affected as other countries. Otherwise, I think we want to thank you so much. We made it during 2013, 2017 to reduce the MPI, the multidimensional poverty, not because of Sierra Leone only, but because of concerted, sub-regional, regional, and international community efforts. So we want to owe this not only to us, but we owe it to the international community as well, and we owe it to people like you, on the research front, because I think the guide we've received from the multidimensional poverty index agencies, those who promote this index, I think went a long way in terms of really, guiding us as to how we approach the fight for inequality. Because, they said what gets measured get done. But for us in Sierra Leone, we believe that not only what gets measured get done, but get measured properly. And we have been able to make sure that, we target poverty resources, to where they are needed most, the special dimension of our challenges, so on and so forth, and as I speak to you, the MPI discourse, the MPI approach is forefront in guiding our policies. You have important institutions, even international institutions on the ground, UNDP and others, applying, the MPI in really guiding resource allocation, in guiding district intervention, in the prioritization of efforts, so on and so forth. So I think with us staying the cause of using MPI in the country, hopefully we're going to have more reduction, and more reduction in multidimensional poverty in the country, So I mean, with that, maybe I could pause a little, while listening to some of you. I have a message, of course, coming from the minister that I would like to read later, when you so permit me to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bangura. It's a fascinating story, that the one you're telling us, because everyone is really, I believe, willing to know what is happening in Sierra Leone, and I think you will have many questions to you later on. So yes, be prepared to have many questions. It's really fascinating. I really believe we even could have a policy brief for Sierra Leone eventually with OPHI. Thank you very much, Mr. Bangura. Now we go to Nora Lustig. Nora, you've just heard the report. You read the report. You just heard what happened in Sierra Leone, and we are really happy that you are here with us I just remind those who are listening to us and watching us that you can place your questions through the chat. So please do while we talk. Nora, welcome.
Thank you, Gonzalo. It is a pleasure to be here. And let me start by thanking Sabina and you, Gonzalo, for inviting me to this very important event, which is the launch of the report 10 years after we started producing the Global MPI. So I should start by congratulating Sabina and her team in producing such a Herculean report, which, you know, me who works also on multi-country approaches knows very well how difficult it is to actually produce something that covers so many countries and do it with rigor and in a way that you can compare across countries and over time. I also think it's an opportunity to commend you, Sabina, and James Foster, and Mariema Santos, who I think is watching us from Argentina, for having started this agenda of the MPI and putting together both an analytically robust and empirically doable MPI, both at the global level and then all the work that has been taking place at the local level. The multidimensional poverty indices are very important, and I see them within, you know, the discussions that take place in the poverty community and as an essential component to what we're doing in the measurement of monetary poverty, where we only take into account one of the dimensions of deprivations. And so I think that it is essential to have something that tells us how people are faring in terms of multiple deprivations experienced simultaneously. From your report, one of the things that I find is more interesting for me, or not interesting, but I think something that I want to emphasize as salient, is something that we often overlook in the discussion. Well, not people like me who come from Latin America.
Nora, can you listen to us? I think your connection is lost.
The multilateral agencies, including...
Te perdimos un poquito, Nora, Te perdimos unos segundos. Happy that you're back.
Am I connected?
Yeah, you are connected, but we lost you like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Carry on, please. No. Yeah. Nora, you...
Yeah, I think something happened. I don't know since when. How much did we lose?
No, we just lost you some seconds, but now you carry on, please.
Okay, so you heard my congratulations, my thanks.
We are fine.
The emphasis on middle-income countries. So I was saying that, you know, it's very important to be aware that middle-income countries are where most of the multidimensionally poor are, and what it means for the role that multilateral development agencies, including banks and also the IMF, have to play in the process of progress in reducing and also in containing the impact of what the current shock, the pandemic, is going to have. Another thing I wanted to mention to start with is that Sabina, you connected the MPI to several MDGs, but I think that you should also connect it to MDG 10, the one that has to do with inequality. And a little later, I will mention why it's important to actually think about what happens in multidimensional poverty and its link to the trends in inequality. I wanted to take the opportunity, maybe, I don't know if we have time during the conversation, if we can have a little bit of further discussion about some of the analytics that goes in the production of the index. For the benefit of the audience, as you know, the index goes from 0 to 1, 1 being the worst case, and you could think, how could I reach 1? Let's say you have a country of 10 million inhabitants and everybody's poor in the 10 dimensions, then the numerator and the denominators would be the same, the product of 10 million times 10, so 100 million, and your index would be 1. If nobody is poor in none of the dimensions, then your numerator would be 0 and your index would be 0. And in between, you have all the stories that are presented country by country in their report. I think that what might be interesting, Sabina and team, is to mention some of the things that have to do with the normative elements that come into the decisions that are very important in defining this index, starting with the dimensions, the weights, the cutoffs, and also the number of deprivations that you've decided would define someone as poor, which is 3 or more. I don't know if we're going to have a lot of time, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about what came into sort of what process broadly led you to all these choices, and also to what extent your indices are robust to changes in these assumptions, because we want an indicator that is robust to changes that are small or medium-sized in the decisions that you made in all these dimensions, because that would say that your results are really there no matter what. I also think it would be interesting to produce a companion report, some work for OPHI in the future that could look into what explains success. We just heard from Sheka, thank you, a little bit about what is behind Sierra Leone's success. And if I understood correctly, a lot had to do with high economic growth. So what is it that is behind your best performing countries, or in your worst performing countries also in contrast, that explains why is it that multidimensional poverty has been lowered by a lot in some countries and by very little in others, or you have some retrogression perhaps in some. There may be some things that have to do with demographic trends and increases in income per capita, but there may be other things that may be very important to isolate in terms of policy actions, and it would be very interesting, I think, to begin to flesh those out in a systematic way. So I think, like I said, you may want to think about having a companion report in addition to your country stories that have an analysis of what is behind the success and the not successful stories. And thinking about Sierra Leone, I think it would be interesting to know a little more about the details of what explains success in the context of a country that has a relatively low income per capita, even though you had a lot of growth. Were there any particular investment decisions that were made by the government, and how was that? How did that translate in achievements that reduced the MPI by so much? Taking advantage that Sheka is with us. Finally, I wanted to say a few things about COVID and retrogression and link this to the discussion of what I mentioned initially about SDG 10 that I think you should add to your list of SDGs that the MPI is linked with. I think that the retrogression that you actually project based on what we know already in terms of what's happening to schooling and what may be happening to undernutrition. One of the issues is that may have long-lasting effects. And you may want to highlight those in, if you write this companion report or anything that you pursue further in the future, I think to emphasize the long-lasting effects that current shocks may have, both in affecting your not only current MPI and sort of how far backward you may go, but how maybe it will affect it over time for a long, long time. We know from studies that have been done on the pandemic of 1918, 1919, that the effects can be long-lasting. There's very interesting paper by Almond looking at children that were in utero during the pandemic and how they have fared worse during their entire life on practically every dimension, including income, including illness, including educational attainment, including disability. We also know from work that has been done on education and returns, education and poverty, that losing 1 year of income can be very expensive, both for the person who loses a year of education, 1 year of education, because the private returns from investing in education are quite high, about on average about 9%. But also, if you take into account all the externalities, the social returns are also quite high and even higher, about 10%. So the lasting effects of affecting in the short term education and maybe some of this lack of education in 1 year can also translate into permanent school dropouts, could be with us for a long, long time. Likewise, the effect on nutrition, we know very well that if you don't do things within the first 2 years of life, those effects can be irreversible and impact children's ability to learn and to have a productive and healthy life in the future. So I think that it would be interesting to complement the work that you've done in terms of projections, or what may mean in the long run, the fact that you may have this retrogression. Now you look particularly at education and health, because the effects could be with us for a long, long time. And your case would be strengthened, if you want, if you take into account those effects. Given this context, I think it would be interesting if we link it to the sort of policy actions, is whether you can identify what should be given priority to avoid this retrogression. Where should the in what eggs, should the investment in a sort of a more constrained fiscal space that we'll have in the current circumstances and perhaps for quite some time, what should be the priority for governments if the retrogression should be mitigated? So let me stop here and again congratulate the team and thank you so much for having me here. It's a delight to be sharing the panel with Gonzalo, Sabina and her team, and with Sheka and Michelle, and I look forward to hearing Michelle's comments and also the response from OPHI's team. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nora. Very, very interesting. And what you're saying, you have to measure, and now we need to understand what happened, what's behind those numbers. So that's why we are very happy to have Michelle Muschett with us, because she was, as a former Minister of Social Development in Panama, she may know a couple of things or two about public policy. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Gonzalo, and thanks to the MPPN team for facilitating this relevant space for collective learning in such a critical time for humanity. And I want to also express my deepest recognition to the extraordinary work done by the HDR office and office team led by Sabina, acknowledging that the evidence provided in the 2020 Global MPI report arrived timely, as Gonzalo said before. However, the real change now is how do we translate these insights into concrete policies that not only prevent us from losing the progress achieved, but allow us to transform the current crisis into an opportunity to take a significant step towards poverty reduction, both at global and national levels. Also, the case of Sierra Leone that Mr. Bangura kindly shared with us shows that this is feasible. That's pretty important. However, this is unlikely to happen organically. Based on my experience as a minister leading the adoption of the national MPI in my country, in Panama, I would like to share with you what I consider 4 critical requirements to really move forward this agenda. One would be that effective leadership from the highest levels of government is required. Poverty reduction must become a state priority, and within that priority, identify the specific priorities, as Nora mentioned before, reflected, and this should be reflected in COVID-19 response and recovery plans, and then translated into concrete policies. And for this, I recommend to all countries participating from this call to review OPHI's recent work on policy tools to address multidimensional poverty and vulnerability to COVID-19 that might be very useful to orient those response and recovery plans. Second, this requires a strong and fluid alignment between political and technical levels. And for this, the multidimensional poverty indexes, the national multidimensional poverty indexes, are very powerful tools to facilitate this alignment and inform high-level decisions throughout the whole policy cycle, from the agenda setting and policy design to the implementation and monitoring. Also, these national MPIs could contribute to orient budgeting and resource allocation in a more effective and transparent way that is even more relevant than ever in this time of crisis. A third concrete recommendation is the importance to be aware that this requires a state vision that transcends government periods, linking the short, medium, and long-term objectives. And for this, fluid communication and even partnerships with other sectors of society could be a good strategy to consider. And four, it's critical to ensure periodic quality data production to inform and monitor policy over time. So to conclude and to open the space for other comments and questions, I want to highlight that a major step has been taken within the last decade. The global recognition that poverty is multidimensional. That's a huge achievement. But there is still lots of work to do in order to translate this recognition into concrete public policies. And I would like to invite all you to see the results of the 2020 Global MPI as a source of hope, as Sabina already said, but also as a strong call for effective leadership to act with vision and determination to tackle poverty in all its dimensions to meet SDG target 1.2.2 by 2030. This report shows that speed and scale are possible, but perhaps a key message for today is that crisis is not an excuse, it's an unprecedented opportunity. And it's going to be up to current government leaders and policymakers to take advantage of this and to ensure that we definitely leave no one behind in our strategies. Back to you, Gonzalo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. So an important word now is hope. Even in the middle of this crisis, we should have hope, because actually the report shows that that there is hope. And I really hope that we'll have a very attractive exchange, because we have many questions and many things to discuss still. So please stay with us, because now we are going to the question and answer. So go back to Sabina and the team for responses from OPHI.
And maybe I first let Mónica and Ricardo, if you want to take a couple questions, and then I do.
Okay, I'm just going to briefly answer some of the questions that have been asked in the chat. Most of them are related to data, so it will be just to let you know that in the OPHI web page, you will find all the country briefs and the doc files that we use for the Global MPI, and you will also find changes over time country briefs. So in there, you will be able to understand or find all the information that a lot of people is asking us in the chat and in the Q&A. So back to you, Sabina.
Thank you so much. I think there are a couple questions about the COVID projections. We simply took blanket projections that 50% of children were out of school. We recognize, for example, in the case of Peru, that there is an aggressive strategy, as we were reminded in the chat, to keep children in school. And it's those kinds of strategies that will permit countries to depart from the projected increases and to reduce them. Right now, we don't have the capacity to have country-specific projections. We don't have all of the information for each of the 70 countries included, but it's certainly an option, and we have worked one by one with different governments to do microsimulations according to their own data. But for the Global MPI right now, we are just using the blanket projections just to clarify what is already in the report. There were also some comments that really were echoing Nora's and Michelle's comments that this work is important, but it's most important if there's policy analysis and if it comes into the socioeconomic responses to COVID. And we completely agree with that. And we very much hope to be a part of it, but we cannot do that part alone. We need many other experts from different disciplines and with country-specific knowledge to do that work. And so we hope that this will be the first step, but very much not the last step. We're very much hoping that people will engage and take them further in terms of the actions that should be given priority and the actions looking back that worked and actually drove positive change. There were also questions about the Logit model, and we have working papers online. So working paper 58 has all of the predictive models and the COVID response, and working paper 57 has all of the changes over time work. And I should say in the changes over time paper, we also have a significant appendix in which the countries included have their global MPI by different poverty cutoffs, but also their national MPI in the case of Sierra Leone or in other countries. So you can see how the trends of these two match. The last thing that I'll say is to answer directly Nora's query about the robustness of the MPI results to changes in the parameters of weights or of the poverty cutoff. And so there's a paper with Ricardo, Nicolai, Sheka, and Gratnam, etc., which look at that, in this case for the 2018 MPI, when we completely added and changed specifications. And we found that 89.7% of all pairwise comparisons, considering standard errors, were the same if we changed the weight on any dimension 33% to either 25% or 50% on that dimension, weighted the other dimensions in turn. And then if we change the poverty cutoff from 33% to 20% or up to 50%, 95.1% of pairwise comparisons were the same. So kinds of robustness analyses that we are doing, we also have the analyses for the full range of poverty cutoffs and weights. And that is also in a paper online. So over to you, Gonzalo.
Yeah, Ricardo, you want to say anything? Thank you, Sabina. Do you want to answer anything, Ricardo?
Well, no, it was just nothing specific, but perhaps I will take just 1 minute to re-emphasize what Moni and Sabina said about the importance of this being for the time being, this is a cross-country study, so all country specificities are not taken into account in the global report. However, we firmly believe that there is a need for national level analyses. And as Sabina said, we need a lot of commitment and a lot of actors in order to overcome that kind of lack of information, because we do believe that any kind of valuable response to this situation that is heavily threatening progress that has been made needs not one common fit all solution cross-nationally, but needs to take into account very specifically the national context and the policies that are evolving. So again, I do invite you to read all the technical details in the Research in Progress series that Sabina mentioned, and also to unite forces when it comes to understanding exactly what can we do now that we know what exactly is the threat that is posed by this pandemic.
Thank you. Felipe, you want to say anything?
Yes, Gonzalo, thank you very much. As you know, this is an event co-hosted by OPHI and the Multidimensional Poverty Peer Network, of which OPHI is its secretariat. And I'd just like to send a very special greeting to all the MPPN participants who are connecting in this call. I've seen colleagues connecting from Chile, Ecuador, Maldives, Turkey, Sierra Leone, of course, colleagues from UNDP in New York and Panama, colleagues connecting from Kuala Lumpur, Peru, Argentina, Jamaica, and South Africa, amongst others. So a very, very warm greeting to all of our participants connecting. Back to you, Gonzalo.
Thank you very much, Felipe. It means that the topic is very important. The topic is interesting. And I would like Sheka to go back to you, because many people are really asking what happened in Sierra Leone, what specifics policies did you have? And I think you also like to read a statement. Sheka, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. It's quite an interesting question, you know, in light of the challenges that we still continue to grapple with. How have we been able to—
Can you turn on your camera if possible?
Well, okay, I think it was controlled over there. It's still controlled there.
All right, someone.
I understand it's stopped. It was stopped. Is that okay?
Let's try it this way. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Thanks.
Okay. As I said, it's quite an interesting question in the midst of the challenges, huge challenges we have. You know, how have we been able to reduce, you know, multi-dimensional poverty down to this level? But I think there are a number of things we need to put in a context. You know, first of all, to understand where we were, you know, in 2013 with multidimensional poverty, where we were at a very high level of multidimensional poverty in the country. I think then 2013, according to the Global Human Development, you know, report, we measured around 77%, you know, about 80%. So you could imagine the level where, and certainly we cannot afford to remain at that level. So we just, you know, naturally would have to make some effort, you know, to come down. In 2015, you know, we measured it, the multidimensional poverty again, we came down to around 68.3. You know, and we kept moving, you know, because certainly as much as we have challenges, you know, some of which could be some probably, you know, policies that could leave more room to be desired, but there are good other policies that were nice, you know, that enable us to stay the course of moving down, you know, the trend from the high level to where. 2015, we had 68.3%. 2017, we came down to 64.8%. So one thing to get straight, first of all, is that as much as we've been able to come down, you know, to climb down this much, but multidimensional poverty still remains very high in the country, you know, at 64.8%. So that's to say the origin, look at the origin, the threshold we were, you know, moving down. You know, that threshold was very high, around 77, 80%, the neighborhood of 80%. That was quite high. So certainly we needed to make some effort, you know. But then, as I said, the other thing to clarify is when we look at the dynamics of multidimensional poverty measurement, you know, the report, the 2017 report of 64.8%. Look at the indicators, about 14 indicators. I think OPHI would correct me if I'm not mistaken. But what the report we have here, you know, for 2017 reporting for Sierra Leone, we used 14 indicators. You know, and out of these 14 indicators, we have 8 indicators that we did, you know, especially very well in measuring multidimensional poverty, well below, you know, 50%, at least from uncensored headcount ratios. You know, when you look at school attendance, nutrition, child mortality, vaccination, you know, housing materials use, you know, even overcrowding, you know, and then cooking fuel. I think we measured very well, you know. So we have to understand the dynamics of the measurement itself, because it's quite a loaded, you know, index carrying a number of indicators. So as much as we may not have been able to do well in a number of those, but a good number where actually we did very, very well, and put together cumulatively, you know, could actually you know, go a long way in outweighing effect on the indicators. So I think that's very important to mention. And then we had very good, we're doing very well in a certain number of policies, you know, especially on the school side, school attendance side, you know, nutrition, child mortality, vaccination, you know, you name them. You know, it could be an issue to some extent, of course, measurement, you know, what indicators did we use, you know, especially comparing a set of indicators in one year or period of measurement, and the other set of indicators in another year, of measurement. But the fact of the matter is that we were making a lot of progress. Generally, we're very much aware about where we're coming from. Come from a high level of poverty, and I mean, well, we cannot say, much again about our post-conflict challenges we had, but whichever way you look at that, those traces, are still been with us, and the reason we still measuring high poverty in the country by 2013, but beyond that, coming down, we accelerated. If it had not been for Ebola, I want to say, we probably would have gone far beyond 64.8%. In other words, the notches we could have actually, achieved down, could have been higher than we achieve now. Because as I said, 2012, 2013, we are very promising for this country in terms of shared growth, because then the youth unemployment, and those around whom inequality actually surround, and many other dimensions, we're doing very, very well in the country when Ebola had to hit end of 2013, early 2014. But the fact is, we are a member of the international development system, both within the sub-region, regional, and global wide. I mean, we join forces together, international community, so as not to really get down to where we were. So there were efforts as much as there were challenges, So we have to look at a range of, issues in terms of where we're making efforts, doing well, and where we could have, not doing well, and try to see when we have a mix of all of this. I think the net effect will still putting us on some appreciable, pictures in terms of what we're trying to do. So I could not have been exhaustive in providing this explanation, but in summary, one, as much as we have huge challenges, we were making, inroads, significant efforts at the same time to make sure that we control, if not all, but certain set of indicators. That's one. Then the measurement issue, I think we have to also be familiar with it. Multidimensional poverty covers a range of indicators, a good number of whom a country will be doing very well in, others may not be doing well, but the net effect can leave you, in doing so well. And where you are coming from in terms of the origin, the threshold, you have to take that into consideration. If you're coming from a very, very, high level of poverty, a very small effort can actually see you down, much rapidly and much more glaringly probably than other countries could be. But the fact of the matter is still measured at 64.8%. I mean, it's high. That one is high. Yeah. As much as we could have scored, this reduction is still high. So I want to pause there, and probably if there are other follow-up questions, I will respond to them. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Sheka. It is really fascinating. So you will have many people asking you later, not only today, but later, what happened in Sierra Leone. I have to ask you something. Would you like to read a statement right now? Sheka, would you like to read?
Hello, yes, please.
We want to read your statement, and then we go, and then we move quickly to the other speakers.
Okay, please, yes. This is the minister's statement. So with that, please permit me to read the minister's statement, and it reads as follows. I'm quoting. I was pleasantly surprised to read in the report of the UNDP and OPHI at the University of Oxford that Sierra Leone had the fastest reduction in multidimensional poverty of 75 countries and 5 billion people from 2013 to 2017. Those years were times of incredible struggle. The Ebola pandemic was terribly dangerous and required unprecedented measures to contain it and protect lives. The government of Sierra Leone, together with the international community, worked around the clock to try to raise awareness, stop the contagion, to do so rapidly, even in very remote areas. We did not in those days aim to have the fastest MPI reduction. We are just trying to cope with Ebola and try to guarantee the access to healthcare, education, and other basic services to people in Sierra Leone. But yes, the solution required that we make improvements in the lives of many people at the same time. And those changes taken together have been captured by the Global MPI. Now in 2019, we launched our own national MPI, which was included in the National Development Plan, and is a tool to monitor progress in the achievement of the SDGs. Our aim is to continue using the National MPI for Sierra Leone as a tool for policy to consolidate those positive changes now that we are no longer in the timeline, and to move forward strongly, fighting interlinked deprivations together. End of quote. And I think it is clear there that we recognize the fact that we are still challenged in the period 2013, 2017, as we are making those, that progress, and we continue to be challenged, and certainly there is no room for complacency. So for complacency, 64.8% is still extremely high of multidimensional poverty, and we're going to continue the struggle to push it down amidst the heinous challenges we face.
Thank you very much, Sheka. Thank you very much. I would like to go back to Nora and then Michelle for some statements. And as you see in the chat, there are many questions. For instance, Andrew Nixon would like to be more specific on the Sierra Leone reduction on poverty. But so we keep those questions later, and then let's go back to Nora and Michelle.
Thanks, Gonzalo. I think that the camera is turned off on your end in my case as well, because I turned it on. So, I mean, I think that questions about Sierra Leone have to be answered by Sheka, but I thought that what I think might be interesting to think going forward in terms of how to organize the why is it that there's been progress, or why not? Maybe it's maybe the team at OPHI together with UNDP can actually start putting together such country narratives and then draw from them a general recommendations in a way that would not be too onerous. I think it would be very helpful to have something like this sooner rather than later, in particular, given the impact of the pandemic. I think there's a lot of appetite in learning how to, what to do in a situation that is so dire. I also wanted to continue on the sort of emphasizing the issue of why what you're doing is linked to SDG 10. It's, and bring some evidence from Latin America in terms of the link between education and inequality. From work that we did many years ago with Luis Felipe Lopez Calva, who is now director of the Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean at UNDP, and then many others continue to work on. What we found is that one of the key factors that structurally explained the decline in inequality in Latin America, which was very visible during the decade of the first decade of this century. It was quite outstanding, and it was pervasive in all countries, was particularly the fact that you had a very sharp improvement in education during the 1990s, which ended up making the low-skilled workers relatively scarce vis-a-vis workers with post-secondary education. And this resulted in a decline in the relative wages of these two groups, and that was one of the main factors behind the decline in inequality. What we're saying now is that with the expected effect of the pandemic on education, we will see the reversal in terms of education itself, but also we will see the long-lasting effects on inequality through the channel of having gone back in terms of the achievement of education, because we know that within the pandemic, people who are able to continue their education will tend to be in the upper echelons of society because they have access to internet, because they have access to high quality parenting, etc. So the inequality connection between what you're finding is huge. And I want to emphasize it again, because that type of inequality cannot be undone easily. It's structural. And so containing the impact, the negative impact on COVID, on educational attainment, and also on nutrition is paramount. And any policies that can be implemented to do that should be implemented as a priority. Back to you, Gonzalo.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you very much. Michelle, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Gonzalo. I just want to, I think Nora's comments were very on the point, and it's clear that lots of work remains to be done, and that this report presents very relevant information that we need to deconstruct and deepen from a policy perspective. And I just want to build upon that and to stress that all the value of these results of the Global MPI and all the interesting discussions around it only would have a meaning if we're able to translate them into concrete policies that transform the lives of those living in multidimensional poverty. So we need action, we need to use it. And for this must become a priority both for global and national levels. And for this, the national MPIs and even the global MPIs are very relevant and powerful tools to really achieve and continue the trend of multidimensional poverty reduction, and to prevent those achievements to be loosened as a consequence of crisis. And again, just to remind that the Sierra Leone case is highly relevant for the world nowadays, because it evidenced that crisis could be an opportunity to reduce poverty and not an excuse to let those levels go back in time. So I just want to stress the importance of continuing this discussion with the purpose of landing this into concrete policies that effectively have an impact on the lives of those living in multidimensional poverty. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much. As we've seen, the importance of linking together the evidence, the numbers that the report is giving us, and then how can we explain those numbers? That element is very important. I believe that in this webinar we will be able to answer some of those questions, but I think some of the other questions will be as a matter of more studies and more people thinking about those numbers. So I think the very good thing about what we have today in the report is that the numbers are there. We have so many countries with trends now, 75 countries with trends. So we invite all of you to give us some ideas on what happened in these countries, what is actually happening, which are the best practices for public policy, because now we will need them. In this new pandemic, for now it's a global one, we will need these answers. So I think we still have like 5 more minutes for questions and answers. And I will go back to Sheka, if that's possible, because as you know, you have many questions to you. And if it's all right, Sheka, could you tell us more specifically in terms of education, do you know which were the policies that helped the MPI to go down on those dimensions like education?
Yes, thank you so much. On education, I think I could see, those are, we have two key indicators there included, in the MPI measurement, capturing education. Ever since the end of the war, 2000 and, do you hear me? Yes, let me get the video, I think, yeah. Okay. Yes, ever since the end of the war, with the government of Ahmed Tijan Kabah to date, education has received, very great attention, and if you could look at the trends in terms of school enrollment, it has ever been going up, with the probably exception of the times we had crises, in between, such as the Ebola crisis, and now we have COVID, for which there were a series of lockdowns, but nonetheless, the policy focus has ever been sustained, in this area, and then it goes beyond just giving blanket and policy attention, but when we talk about specific fiscal issues, such as cushioning some expenditure burden on the side of the parents. Government has been making its own effort providing school subsidies, especially for government schools and some government assisted, schools that constitute the vast majority of schools, in the country. Government has always provided, subsidies in this area, school subsidies, to cover basic expenditure, as well as public examinations, for the national primary school examination, the basic education, certificate examination, and the West African school certificate examination. All of this are some kind of example that give credence to the fact that a lot of effort done in education. So you see huge school enrollment in this area. Of course, you could interrogate the questions of school dropouts, because there are still incidences of school dropout. We have to recognize that, but generally, government sustained, and sustained focus on supporting schools. And we can see now that has been much more accelerated, policy acceleration, with the declaration of free quality education, in the country with the current government regime, and then putting human capital as #1 in our current medium-term national development plan. The first cluster is on human capital development, building, building on the previous effort, because generally we understand all our, sustainable economic growth challenges lies in experiencing low value added per worker, the question of productivity in the country, which is a big function of, how well, people are educated, is taking forefront. This is something that was recognized way back there. It's not only about, government effort at the same time. Even households, we are sensitized. They are making their own efforts. There's a friend here mentioned issue of a minimal intergovernmental fiscal transfers. Well, of course, that could not have been sufficient. Certainly, one recognize that. We're still grappling with local resource mobilization. As much as we're receiving good contributions from our friends, abroad. But generally, as far as education is concerned, with the policy awareness and advocacy, for everyone, including households, to recognize the need for education. It's not only government that has been making efforts in this area. household, the private, coming to health, because we can see that the child mortality is the indicator there too, shows some good progress. It's a challenge that we have been seeing a lot of out-of-pocket spending, health spending, but people have been making effort. We have to recognize them that, in the midst of tough economic hardship, of course, people were able to sustain, minimum spending in the required services, in addition to what government, is providing. I was going to go to health, but the question on education, I think that's the explanation. If you follow in the recent trends, the attention government is giving on education. This is building on the attention successive governments have ever been given to education since the end of the war. And we can see the indicators reflected there, in the MPI, such as the school attendance, so on and so forth. So we will not be able to be exhaustive in providing answers to this, but I hope that my contacts would reach our colleagues asking those questions would have my contact, so that beyond this, we can engage further. The fact of the matter is, let me reiterate, 2013, we were very high up there in terms of multidimensional poverty. About 80%. Certainly, no country can afford to have it stop there, or to have it just reduced. We just would have to make all efforts to reduce it. And we made effort to come from that about 80% now to 64.8%. 64.8% is still huge, as much as we had made this effort, coming from down there. We're gonna keep pushing. We know that it could be difficult in a way to explain, given Sierra Leone still being known or referred to as being a fragile state, and there are a number of challenges, of course, we continue to face. But what we also have to recognize is the significant effort government is generally making to make sure that we improve on the lot of everyone. And we are very conscious about the usefulness of MPI, in the country, because, currently almost all key decisions in terms of resource allocation, when it comes to distribution across space, districts, so on and so forth, draw from MPI to inform us. And for as long as that consciousness is there, I think the expected impact on poverty reduction, especially MPI reduction, cannot be, uncontemplated. My minister makes the point that yes, we were pleasantly surprised, meaning that as much as we were making effort, we knew the challenges we are facing, such as related to limited, government fiscal transfer. But we were making effort. The indicators are many. We could not have done bad in all of them. And in the reports, there are 8 of them measure, below 50%, way below 50%. As much as others, maybe 6 or a few others are on the high end. But we believe the net could see us, at this level, to which we have been able to reduce poverty in the country, since 2013. Let me pause there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No. Yeah. We can be here many hours. We already have 1 hour and a half. We're about to close with Sabina, but I would like to thank all of you. Of course, Sheka, Sabina, Michelle, Nora, Felipe, Ricardo, Mónica, for being here, and all of you who were here were almost 1 hour and 30 minutes. So thank you very much. Please read the report, and please give us some ideas, some research on what happened in the countries, what actually happened in the countries. Let's recheck the state statistics, let's recheck the data and see what happens, because we need answers now for the new and unfortunate pandemic we have so far. So thank you very much, Sabina. Please, closing remarks from you. Thank you very much.
Thanks to all. And Felipe has put in the chat box the link to the OPHI website where you can find files if you want to find how to compute the MPI in Mexico, or you can find all of the other materials, and we hope that you might visit that. One of the features of the pandemic is that we've gotten to know each other. We Zoom in our settings from our homes. We talk with people and we get people in different ways. And my hope is that this community of people who are interested in poverty and interested in working together to fight poverty will be able to get to know each other intellectually also in different ways, to try to understand how our different skills, our insights, our questions, our criticisms can work together, in a sense, to build momentum, to really make a decisive turning point in the poverty. The global report suggests there still is, and that the projections suggest COVID has reintroduced. So I really hope this is the start of a rich set of interactions. Thank you so very much, and thank you to Gonzalo and Felipe for hosting this event.
Thank you very much to all of you, Sabina. Thank you to the effort of the team. Thank you to Sheka very much. Again, people will be asking you about many things on Sierra Leone. Thank you very much for being here, Michelle. Thank you very much, Nora. Muchísimas gracias. Ricardo, Mónica, Felipe, muchas gracias. And thank you to all of you out there. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next one.
Just before we hang up, can we turn on all the cameras just to say goodbye, including Sabina and Sheka? Please. Okay. Thank you very much. This is just for the screenshot of the picture. This is the new way of taking pictures of the important events we host.
It's a selfie. Thank you very much.
Yes, and don't forget also, I'm gonna post on the chat that you can go to the MPPN website for the country participants that are connected and that are interested in following up in creating South cooperation projects. You can go to the mppn.org, and then you'll find more information there. And obviously on the OPHI website, you'll find the Global MPI report. Thank you so much, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. Bye.
A pleasure. Bye.
Thank you.